So when you hire, like, a structural inspector to look at an old house.
Right, like if you're buying a fixer-upper.
Yeah, exactly. They completely ignore the cosmetic stuff. I mean, they do not care about the peeling paint in the hallway.
No, or the outdated carpets.
Right. They just take this heavy-duty flashlight, walk straight past all the living areas, and they just go right down into the damp, dark basement.
The scary part of the house.
Totally. And they shine that light on the concrete foundation, and they point out this tiny hairline crack. And they look at you and tell you that the entire structure is, shifting into the earth.
Which is pretty much the worst news you can get.
It is. Because suddenly, all those weekend decorating plans you had.
Oh, they're completely irrelevant.
Irrelevant. You are forced to abandon the superficial stuff and actually address the very foundation of the building, which is honestly a massive, terrifying shift in perspective.
Yeah, because the transition from merely, decorating a space to structurally rebuilding it, it requires a completely different set of tools, a completely different mindset, and this willingness to tear things apart before you can actually put them back together.
Exactly. And well, we are taking that structural inspector's flashlight to our own souls today.
I love that.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a Christian classic today, written way back in the year 1656.
A very long time ago.
Yeah, it's called The Reformed Pastor, originally titled Gildus Salvianus. And it was written by this English minister, Richard Baxter.
Such a fascinating figure.
He really is. But I want to speak directly to you, the listener, right now. Because the goal today is to take this, 400-year-old masterpiece, which was originally written as a manual for 17th century clergy, and we're going to use it to radically deepen your everyday faith.
Yeah, this isn't just for pastors.
Not at all. We are going to explore how this text can, unlock a more profound understanding of the Bible for you and inspire a life that is just completely unreservedly devoted to loving Christ and serving the people around you.
Which is an incredible mission for today, because opening a book from 1650s England can feel, it can feel intimidating. Right?
Oh, for sure, the language alone.
Right. And especially a book written during a period of such immense religious and political violence.
Yeah.
The English Civil War had just completely ripped the country apart.
Right.
Families were divided, the monarchy was overthrown, and the church was just caught in the crossfire of this constant theological bickering.
It was a mess.
It was. But Richard Baxter was not writing from the comfort of some ivory tower academic lounge in Oxford or Cambridge.
Right, he was in the trenches.
Exactly. He was a minister in this really gritty working class town called Kidderminster.
Kidderminster. Just sounds gritty.
Right. It was a town of weavers, characterized by severe poverty, illiteracy, and just this general heavy indifference to religion.
So he looked around at the broader church culture of his day, and he realized that the foundation was cracked.
Yes.
People were literally arguing over the color of the paint while the entire building was collapsing.
And that context completely reframes how he uses the word reformed in his title.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because when we hear reform today,
we think of specific theological camps or historical denominations, right?
Oh, totally.
But what's fascinating here is that in Baxter's era, some factions thought Reformation merely meant changing the external ceremonies or getting rid of certain clerical vestures, literally just changing the clothing that the ministers wore.
Wow. Talk about superficial.
Exactly. And Baxter viewed that shallow definition with absolute contempt.
He had no time for it.
None. For him, a reformed church had absolutely nothing to do with external trappings. It meant the literal, agonizing, glorious restoration of human souls.
He was talking about daily holiness.
Yes, daily, gritty holiness.
He's calling for this inside-out renovation, which kind of brings us to the most uncomfortable but necessary starting point of his entire philosophy.
We have to start with ourselves.
We do. We cannot talk about transforming the culture or serving our local church or even just loving our next-door neighbor until we take a really hard look at the instrument God actually uses to do those things.
Which is our own hearts.
Yeah. Baxter forces us to look in a very unflinching mirror.
He really does. He builds this entire framework on the Apostle Paul's farewell address to the Ephesian elders.
Right, from the book of Acts.
Yes, Acts chapter 20, verse 28. Paul says, "Take heed, therefore, unto yourselves and to all the flock."
The sequencing there is just everything, isn't it?
It is. The command to take heed to yourself absolutely precedes the command to care for the flock.
Right. And Baxter takes that sequence and he derives this terrifying warning from it. He argues that it is entirely possible to be, completely void of the saving grace of God that you're so busy offering to everybody else.
It's a sobering thought.
It is. He uses this term unsanctified professor. And, in his day, professor just meant someone who professes faith, like a confessing Christian.
Right, not a college teacher.
Exactly.
I mean, the modern equivalent would be the cultural evangelical who just knows the vocabulary flawlessly.
Oh, we all know that person.
Right.
Or we are that person.
Right. This is the person who knows exactly when to stand, when to sit, which theological buzzwords to drop in a small group.
How to critique the pastor's sermon over lunch.
Exactly. They have all the external architecture of faith, but they totally lack the inner saving reality of a personal union with Jesus Christ.
The foundation is cracked.
Yeah, they are experts at managing the aesthetics of religion while the foundation is just entirely rotten.
Man, there's a quote from the source material that genuinely haunted me. I have to read this. Baxter writes, "Many have warned others that they come not to that place of torment, while yet they hasten to it themselves."
Wow.
I mean, think about that. You can be the person standing on the side of the road, holding the warning sign about a cliff ahead, diligently directing traffic to safety, while you yourself are walking backward, right off the edge, into the abyss.
The psychological dissonance required to live that way is staggering. But, I mean, it happens constantly.
It really does.
Baxter is pointing out that familiarity with holy things can actually immunize us against their power.
That is such a good point.
If you handle the Bible every single day, if you are constantly in church meetings, you can so easily confuse your proximity to the things of God with intimacy with God himself.
Right. Knowledge about Christ is not the same as personal union with him.
Never.
I was actually looking at the original language Paul uses in Acts 20, where he says, take heed. The Greek word there is prosecho.
Prosecho, yes.
And it doesn't seem to imply like a casual passing glance, like checking your hair in the mirror before you walk out the door.
No, it's not a quick check.
It feels much heavier than that.
It is. Prosecho is a compound word that literally means to hold one's mind towards something deliberately.
Deliberately.
Yeah, it is a fixed, intentional, unyielding gaze. It requires immense mental and spiritual discipline.
And Baxter is demanding that we turn that gaze inward before we ever dare to look outward.
Yes. Formal routine, sitting in the pews, serving on the finance committee, organizing the church potluck, all of that becomes spiritually lethal if the heart remains cold.
If it's distant from the actual warm, transformative love of Jesus.
Precisely.
But, I can hear a modern listener feeling a bit of resistance to this right now.
Sure.
Because in our current culture, we emphasize outward action so much, social justice, community service, loving your neighbor.
Doing things for others.
Right. And focusing this intensely on our own internal spiritual state. It sounds a bit like spiritual navel-gazing.
You can feel that way, yeah.
There's this temptation to say, isn't it selfish to be so obsessed with my own soul? Shouldn't I just get to work helping others?
And that objection totally makes sense if you view personal holiness as an end in itself. But Baxter doesn't see it that way.
Right.
He sees it as the necessary engine for loving others. I mean, the reality of human nature is that we cannot impart what we do not possess.
You cannot pour from an empty cup. It makes me think of a deep sea diver. Like, if a diver is going down into the freezing, crushing depths of the ocean to rescue someone or recover something valuable, their absolute first priority has to be the integrity of their own air tether.
The line connected to the surface?
Exactly. If they neglect their own air supply in this frantic rush to help someone else, the line gets pinched, they run out of oxygen, and they just become a casualty themselves.
That's a great analogy.
Keeping that lifeline clear isn't selfish. It is the absolute prerequisite to being a rescuer.
And Baxter operates on that exact logic. He writes, "We are the nurses of Christ's little ones. If we forbear taking food ourselves, we shall famish them."
Wow. If we don't eat, they starve.
Exactly. If your own soul is starving, if you are cut off from the nourishment of God's presence, you really have nothing to offer a hurting world.
Except your own exhaustion.
Yeah. And eventually, your own hypocrisy.
So if we take Baxter seriously here, it completely upends how we evaluate our lives. We have to examine our secret habits.
The things no one else sees.
Right. Baxter says that to be useful to God, you must, quote, keep out lusts and passions. You must be much at home, and you must be much with God.
He is pointing to the secret garden of the heart.
Yeah.
Because the battle for spiritual vitality is always won or lost in that secret place. And think about it. The world we live in is engineered to pull our attention outward constantly.
Constantly. We're just bombarded by distraction.
Earthly comforts, digital noise, social media.
It never stops.
So setting a deliberate guard over our eyes, our thoughts, our desires, it requires swimming against the current of the entire culture.
Yeah, spiritual strength isn't generated by just, human willpower.
No, it's received. It's received through intimate, daily, unhurried fellowship with the Heavenly Father.
But once we have that tether secure, once our hearts are actually engaged with God, Baxter does not let us stay in isolation.
Not at all.
He violently shifts our focus outward, and the way he motivates us to love other people isn't by giving us like a guilt trip about duty.
Right, he doesn't say you just have to try harder.
No, he does it by showing us the sheer unfathomable value of the people around us.
The transition from internal holiness to outward action in his mind is completely seamless.
So let's go back to Acts 20.28. The first half was, "Take heed therefore unto yourselves and to all the flock."
And then we get the second half, which basically establishes the stakes of everything we do. Paul says to feed the church of God, which he hath purchased with his own blood.
Purchased with his own blood. I mean, that phrase alone should drop us to our knees.
It's staggering. Baxter views every single human being through this uncompromising eschatological lens.
Meaning he's looking at eternity.
Yes. He deeply believed that every person walking the muddy streets of Kidderminster, every person sitting in the pews was an immortal soul, destined for either eternal joy in the presence of God or eternal misery separated from him.
And when you truly believe that, the stakes of every human interaction become infinitely high.
There is another quote from the sources that perfectly captures this weight. Let me pull it up. Here. Baxter writes, "If Christ had but committed to my keeping one spoonful of his blood in a fragile glass, how curiously would I preserve it?"
Wow.
And then he goes on, "If then he have committed to me the purchase of his blood, should I not as carefully look to my charge?"
One spoonful of his blood in a fragile glass.
That image is brilliant because it evokes immediate physical tension.
Yeah, I feel stressed just thinking about holding it.
Right. If you were holding a literal glass containing the blood of God, your entire physical and mental focus would be consumed by protecting it.
You definitely wouldn't be casually scrolling on your phone.
No. You wouldn't be distracted by minor annoyances. Your absolute reverence for what you are holding would dictate your every single movement.
And the biblical vocabulary Paul uses here really amplifies that reverence.
Mm-hmm.
The Greek word translated as purchase is peripoisato.
Peripoisato.
Yeah. And it signifies acquiring of something for oneself at a great cost.
Yes, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the people in our churches, the people in our lives, they do not belong to us.
Right.
They belong exclusively to God, and he bought them at the highest price imaginable in the universe.
And Baxter also heavily leans on the Hebrew concept of the soul, right? The nephesh.
Exactly, the nephesh. It highlights the absolute preciousness of individual breathing lives that are under our care.
To really drive this home, Baxter frequently draws on the terrifying imagery from the Old Testament, specifically Ezekiel chapter 33.
The watchman on the wall.
Yes. And let's spend some time on that because the cultural context of the watchman is so distant from our modern lives.
We don't really have a grid for it.
Right. We have home security systems. We have police forces. We don't have stone walls around our cities.
No. But in the ancient Near East, the watchman, or sofa in Hebrew, was basically the single point of failure for an entire city's survival.
Okay, paint that picture for us.
Imagine standing on a stone wall in the dead of night. It is freezing, it is pitch dark, and thousands of people are sleeping in the city behind you, completely vulnerable.
And your sole job.
Your sole job, your shamar, which means to keep, guard, or preserve, is to stare into that darkness and look for the approaching enemy army.
And when you see the enemy, you have to blow the trumpet to wake the city up so they can arm themselves.
But God gives Ezekiel this chilling warning. He says that if the watchman falls asleep or gets distracted or is just simply too cowardly to blow the trumpet, the enemy will come and destroy the people.
And what happens to the watchman?
God says, "His blood I will require at the watchman's hand."
Oh, wow.
The watchman bears blood guilt for the souls that perished because of his silence.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where Baxter's theology crashes into the reality of a modern layperson's life.
How so?
Well, we aren't all pastors standing in a pulpit. Most listeners are, working in offices, they're raising kids, going to school. But we all have the sphere of influence. We have coworkers, we have siblings, we have neighbors. And I think about the difficult people in our lives.
The ones we'd rather avoid.
Exactly. The neighbor who is always looking for an argument over the property line, Or the coworker who constantly sabotages your projects.
The family member who causes drama at every single holiday gathering?
Yes. Our default human setting is to view them as nuisances.
We reduce immortal souls to mere inconveniences.
We get annoyed that they're just standing in our way.
But Baxter's eschatological lens completely shatters that annoyance. He is demanding that we look at that frustrating, deeply flawed person and realize that they are an immortal soul for whom Jesus Christ shed his blood.
When you look at the person who just cut you off in traffic, or the family member who insulted you, do you see a fragile glass containing the blood of God?
It changes everything. Adopting that perspective radically changes your actual physiological response to them.
It replaces irritation with, like, a deep, reverent tenderness.
It doesn't mean you ignore their flaws, obviously, but you begin to recognize their eternal value. You start to see them not as an adversary to be defeated, but as a captive to be rescued.
And because souls are infinitely precious, Baxter realized that a generalized, Sunday-only religion was a catastrophic failure.
It wasn't nearly enough.
No. If you are guarding fragile glasses of divine blood, you can't just stand on a stage once a week, shout some instructions, and hope for the best.
Right. We have to engage with people intimately, one-on-one.
And this realization led to Baxter's massive shift in pastoral care. He introduced a concept known historically as cura animarum.
The care of souls.
Yes. He recognized that public preaching, no matter how eloquent or how loud or how theologically precise, is utterly insufficient to transform a community that is burdened by ignorance.
Right. He looked at his congregation and saw that merely listening to a sermon didn't automatically translate to a transformed life.
Right. So he implemented this rigorous, honestly exhausting system of private house-to-house instruction.
He literally walked through the muddy streets of Kidderminster and knocked on the doors of the weavers.
One by one.
One by one. He insisted that the gospel must be applied particularly.
Particularly.
Yes, to actual persons in their actual unique spiritual condition. I mean, think about it like this. Public preaching is like prescribing the exact same medicine to a crowd of 1,000 people.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
Right. Some of them have a fever, some have a broken leg, some are perfectly healthy. The care of souls requires the physician to actually sit down with the individual patient, diagnose their specific ailment, and apply the exact remedy they need.
And this connects directly to the biblical blueprint for how faith is supposed to be transmitted in the first place.
Because historically, the family home was designed to be a school of religion.
Baxter grounds his entire house-to-house method in Deuteronomy chapter 6.
Where God commands his people to teach his words diligently to their children.
Yeah, God says to talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up.
And, the Hebrew word Torah is often mistranslated in our minds as this rigid, sterile, legal code.
Just a list of rules.
Right, but it actually means instruction or teaching. Christian formation is meant to be this whole life process woven into the fabric of just ordinary relationships and domestic life.
To pull that off requires a very specific type of spiritual leadership. We're not talking about CEOs managing a religious nonprofit here.
No, not at all. And the Greek words used for church leadership in the New Testament clarify this beautifully.
Let's hear them.
First, we have episkopos, which is usually translated as overseer or bishop.
But Baxter continually stresses that this is not a ceremonial title.
Right. It's not for a man wearing fancy robes and sitting on a throne. It implies vigilant, boots-on-the-ground guardianship. It is the active, watchful role of that Ezekiel watchman.
And the second word is poimaino,
which means to shepherd or to feed.
So this encompasses leading, guarding, and protecting the flock from error.
Yes. And if we trace this back to its Hebrew roots in Psalm 23, or we look at Peter's use of it in 1 Peter 5, the underlying concept is the roe.
The roe.
The gentle, self-sacrificing shepherd who literally lives out in the elements with the sheep.
Standing in sharp contrast to the hireling.
Exactly. The hireling only does the job for a paycheck and flees the second the wolf comes.
True shepherding requires physical and emotional proximity. Sheep need to be known, not just yelled at from a distance.
They need the shepherd near them.
But, I have to pause here. Because as inspiring as this sounds in a 17th century context, I am thinking about how this plays out in the 21st century.
It's a very different world.
It is. In our modern culture, the absolute highest value we hold is personal privacy.
Our homes are our fortresses.
Exactly. So the idea of a friend, Or even a church leader knocking on my door, sitting on my couch, and asking me deeply probing questions about my hidden sins.
It sounds incredibly invasive.
It sounds like a fantastic way to ruin a friendship and get labeled as like a self-righteous busybody. How on earth does a modern layperson apply this without being a total nuisance?
Well, Baxter was intimately aware of that exact tension. I mean, even in the 1650s, people did not want their private sins exposed.
Human nature hasn't changed.
Not a bit. His solution is actually the crux of his entire methodology. He says this personal instruction must be done in what he calls tender love.
Tender love.
He writes that people need to see that we care for no outward thing, not their wealth, not their liberty, not their honor in comparison to their salvation.
So you cannot just walk up to someone and demand an audit of their soul?
No, you have to earn the right to speak. Friendship must be cemented by piety, but it has to be demonstrated through sacrificial action.
You have to be willing to spend your time, your money, your energy on them long before you ask them the hard questions.
Yes. If they know that you truly, deeply, unconditionally love them, they will accept the hard words.
It makes me think of a relationship with a really good doctor.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if a physician who has treated you for years, who has shown immense care for your well-being, looks you in the eye and says, your lifestyle is destroying your heart, and if you don't change, you are going to die.
You don't get offended by that.
You don't.
Mm.
You don't accuse them of being invasive or judgmental. You thank them because you know their motive is your healing.
And Baxter argues that we must speak with such evident, bleeding love that the person sitting across from us cannot help but feel the absolute weight of our concern.
Because if you approach them with arrogance or a desire to, prove your own theological superiority.
They will shut the door in your face.
And rightly so.
Rightly so.
So let's get incredibly practical here. If we have established that tether of love, how do we actually diagnose the spiritual state of a friend or a family member?
Baxter actually provides a method for examining someone's soul.
And these questions are breathtaking. Let's slow down and really grapple with these because they form this amazing diagnostic toolkit for anyone trying to foster spiritually accountable friendships.
The first diagnostic question Baxter encourages us to ask is this. Is your heart turned from sin, and do you hate the sins you once loved?
That is such a piercing distinction. He doesn't ask, do you still commit sin?
No, because every honest Christian knows the answer to that is yes.
Right. He asks, has your affection changed?
Yes. It is one thing to struggle with a habit. It is entirely another to secretly love it. He's asking, do you hate the poison that is destroying your relationship with God?
The shift in affection is the truest marker of the Holy Spirit's work.
Exactly. And then the second question pushes even deeper into our motivations. He asks, have you taken the everlasting enjoyment of God for your happiness?
Meaning, is God your ultimate prize? Or is he just a cosmic insurance policy so you don't go to hell?
It's a tough question.
It is. I think about how often modern Christianity pitches Jesus as like a life coach who will fix your marriage and balance your checkbook.
Right. He's just a means to an end.
But Baxter is asking, are you looking forward to heaven because God is there? Or just because it's a nice place where you get to see your deceased relatives and avoid eternal torment?
If God is merely a means to an end rather than the end itself, the foundation is cracked.
And then Baxter brings it all down to the daily grind with his third question. He asks, is your daily principal business to seek him?
Not your Sunday business, your daily principal business.
If someone sat across from me on a Tuesday afternoon,
Yeah.
When my inbox is overflowing, my kids are screaming, the mortgage is due, and asked me, is your principal business today seeking God?
You'd probably want to hide under the table.
I would. That question just exposes how easily we allow the urgent demands of modern life to completely crowd out the eternal.
But imagine the profound transformation that would occur if we actually fostered this kind of deep, spiritually accountable friendship in our own lives.
Yeah.
Imagine having a friend who loves you enough, who has earned enough trust to look you in the eye over a cup of coffee and gently ask, is your heart turning away from the sins you used to love?
It would be terrifying, honestly. But it would be entirely life-altering.
Completely.
But, as Baxter is really quick to point out, there's a massive, immovable prerequisite for anyone attempting to ask these questions.
You can't just ask them if your own house is a mess.
Exactly. If we're going to knock on someone's door and talk about the state of their soul, our own lives better perfectly validate the words coming out of our mouths.
Which brings us to Baxter's relentless focus on the harmony of life and doctrine.
He calls this the sermon of a life.
The sermon of a life. He lays down a very strict, uncompromising rule for anyone who claims the name of Christ. He says, we must study as hard how to live well as how to preach well.
Because nothing breeds cynicism and disgust faster than hypocrisy.
Nothing.
I mean, if you knock on your neighbor's door to talk about their eternal soul, but they saw you screaming at a cashier at the grocery store yesterday.
Your visit just did catastrophic damage to the gospel.
Come on.
Baxter highlights the extreme danger of a life that contradicts our words. If we talk constantly about the glories of heaven and the eternal nature of the soul, but our daily lives are obsessed with acquiring worldly wealth, keeping up with the neighbors, hoarding our resources.
We prove to the world that we don't actually believe a single word we are saying.
Right. We show our true colors.
It's like a structural engineer who designs this massive, beautiful suspension bridge.
Okay.
But then he refuses to drive his own family across it, choosing to live in a tent by the river instead.
Why wouldn't he drive on it?
Exactly. If he doesn't trust the bridge he built, why should anyone else? If we preach that sin is a deadly toxin that destroys the soul, but we are casually drinking it in our free time behind closed doors, the world will smell the hypocrisy a mile away.
They will reject the gospel entirely.
So Baxter gets intensely practical about how to actually align our lives with our doctrine.
He does. He gives commands that bite into our comfort.
What does he say?
Well, he commands his readers to abound in works of charity. He tells the ministers of his day, who, by the way, were not wealthy men, to buy small books and catechisms for the poor if they could afford it.
That's sacrificial.
It is. And then he issues this devastating command. Do not seek great things for yourself or your posterity.
Do not seek great things for yourself or your children.
Right.
Wow. In a culture built entirely on upward mobility, wealth accumulation, leaving a massive inheritance, that command is radical.
It's completely countercultural. But the reason Baxter's words carry so much weight is that he wasn't just theorizing in a vacuum. He actually lived this out.
We have the historical proof of it, right?
We do. By living out this radical generosity and self-denial, he saw virtually the entire town of Kidderminster converted.
And we are talking about a town of roughly 2,000 people. How did that actually happen mechanically, like logistically?
Well, when he arrived, Kidderminster was known as an ignorant, reveling, drunken place.
That's a tough crowd.
Very. But Baxter implemented this grueling schedule. He and his assistants would spend an hour with each family every Monday and Tuesday.
Every family.
They methodically worked through the entire town. He gave away his own money to provide them with Bibles and catechisms. He lived simply, without luxury.
He walked the walk.
He did. Through his relentless, loving visitation and a lifestyle that perfectly matched his preaching, the town's foundation was entirely rebuilt.
Historians actually note that a few years into his ministry, the transformation was so complete that you could walk down the streets of Kidderminster on a Sunday and hear families singing psalms echoing from almost every home.
It's incredible.
The weavers were talking about theology at their looms.
That transformation was the direct result of a community learning to live coram Deo.
Okay, let's unpack that concept because it is the engine behind this kind of integrity.
Coram Deo is a Latin phrase that means before the face of God.
Before the face of God.
Yes. It describes a life lived in the constant conscious awareness of God's presence, under his sovereign authority, and entirely to his glory. Wow. Baxter lived with this acute, piercing awareness that his actions in the dark, his private thoughts, his secret financial dealings, they were all seen by the chief shepherd.
So Baxter forces us to ask ourselves, does your daily conduct match your biblical profession?
When your coworkers see how you handle your money, do they see someone who truly believes their treasure is in heaven?
Or when your family observes how you spend your free time, do they see someone whose principal business is seeking God?
Right. When you react to a difficult person online or in a meeting, is your reaction validating the gospel or undermining it?
Because your life is the loudest sermon you will ever preach.
It absolutely is. But, living with that level of intensity, living coram Deo, loving difficult people selflessly, examining your own heart constantly, and giving away your wealth.
It's exhausting.
It's beyond exhausting.
It sounds impossible to sustain over a lifetime. It begs the question, how do we do this without burning out and walking away from the faith entirely?
And Baxter was incredibly honest about his own struggles with this exact burnout.
He was.
Yes. He wasn't pretending to be some spiritual superman. He wrote this confession regarding the grueling work of his house-to-house visitation. He said, "I did long convinced of it, but my apprehensions of the difficulties were too great, and my apprehensions of the duty too small."
That is a remarkably candid admission.
It really is.
He is basically saying, I knew exactly what God wanted me to do, but I made the obstacles look massive, and I made God's command look insignificant.
Which we all do.
We all do it.
Yeah.
We magnify the difficulty of obedience and minimize the authority of the one commanding it. We think, I can't disciple my neighbor, they might reject me, it's too awkward.
Baxter realized that the antidote to this fear, and really the ultimate cure for spiritual burnout, is hard study and truly deeply knowing the nature of God.
Knowing who is commanding us.
Exactly. He famously advised his readers, study hard, for the well is deep and our brains are shallow.
Study hard, for the well is deep and our brains are shallow. I love that pairing of humility and diligence.
It's so good.
It is, and I want to validate the listener here who might be feeling entirely overwhelmed by the theology we are discussing today.
It's a lot to take in.
It is a lot. You hear words like coram deo and episcopos, you think about 17th century Puritans, and you might think, I don't have a seminary degree. I have a shallow brain for this stuff. I can't keep up.
But Baxter is explicitly saying that having a shallow brain is not a permanent excuse to retreat into anti-intellectualism.
Right, it's just a starting point.
Exactly. It means we have to rely heavily on the Holy Spirit, but we also have to put in the spiritual sweat equity to learn. We are finite creatures, but the well of God's truth is infinitely deep. Therefore, laziness is not an option.
And this relentless pursuit of knowing God changes how we view all other knowledge, doesn't it?
This raises an important question about how we interact with the world. Baxter argued that nothing can be rightly known if God is not known.
He uses an analogy for this, right?
Yeah. A brilliant one. He explains how secular knowledge relates to divine knowledge by saying that single letters and syllables are just nonsense until they are put into a coherent sentence.
Oh, like a toddler playing with random alphabet blocks on the floor.
Exactly like that. You can study an A or a B all day, but it means nothing in isolation.
Right.
In the same way, the entire creation, the physical universe, human history, biology, economics, is just broken syllables and nonsense without the creator.
Wow.
True philosophy, true science, true learning is all about seeing God in his works. If you study biology or physics without seeing the creator, you are just staring at disconnected alphabet blocks.
You are entirely missing the sentence God has written.
Yes.
So all of our learning, whether it's reading the Bible, studying history, mastering a trade, it should all be driving us toward a holy reverence for God. It all connects back to the Creator.
And Baxter fiercely protected that reverence. He possessed an absolute hatred for teaching or preaching that merely tickled the mind.
Tickled the mind.
Yeah, he despised ministers who treated the pulpit like a stage play.
Oh, man.
The things of God are not mere entertainment. We shouldn't approach our faith looking for a quick emotional high, a few laughs, or what he called tickling levity.
That is so countercultural today. I mean, we live in an era of consumer Christianity.
I really do.
We want our sermons to be structured like TED Talks. We want to be entertained. We want engaging visuals. We want the pastor to be funny. And we want 3 easy, actionable steps to a better life.
But Baxter is saying, no, the well is deep. When you open your Bible, you are encountering the living God. That requires awe, not amusement.
Oh, not amusement.
If we cultivate that awe, if we pray for God to reveal himself in our everyday work, our studies, our family life, we will tap into the sustained energy required to actually live out everything we've discussed today.
Because awe is the only fuel that burns long enough to sustain a lifetime of obedience.
It's the only thing that works.
So what does this all mean? Let's step back and look at the entire house we have inspected today.
It's been quite an inspection.
It really has. We have been on a beautiful, grueling, challenging journey through Richard Baxter's The Reformed Pastor.
A journey that fundamentally must begin with the inward reality of our own souls.
It starts with rigorous self-examination. We have to ensure our own hearts are ablaze with grace, that our tether to the surface is secure before we dive into the depths to help anyone else.
And then that inward holiness must translate into a profound realization of the infinite blood-bought value of every single human soul around us.
Recognizing that they aren't nuisances, but fragile glasses holding the very blood of Christ.
Which naturally demands that we abandon generalized, comfortable religion. We must love people individually, specifically and incarnationally, willing to ask the hardest questions enveloped in the most tender love.
And to do that with any shred of credibility, the sermon of our daily lives must perfectly echo the gospel we claim to believe.
Our actions in the dark, our finances, our reactions to conflict, all of it must be lived coram deo, fueled by a deep, reverent awe of a God whose well is infinitely deep.
It is nothing less than a total reconstruction of the Christian life.
It truly is.
So I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over today as you step back into your normal routine.
Something to sit with.
Exactly.
Hmm?
Imagine for a moment the very second you step out of this life and into eternity.
Okay.
You are not just standing before a distant cosmic judge. You are standing before the chief shepherd who bought the flock with his own blood. What if the truest, most accurate measure of your life wasn't your career trajectory, your financial portfolio, or even how many Sundays you sat in a church building?
Wow.
What if the truest measure of your faith was found in the quiet, unseen, incredibly ordinary moments? The moments where you look at a deeply flawed, frustrating neighbor, a difficult coworker, or an estranged family member, and in that split second of frustration, you chose to treat them as an immortal soul worth the very blood of God.
That changes everything.
How would that realization change the way you speak to the very next person you interact with today? Because ultimately, we aren't just here to put a fresh coat of paint on our lives.
No, we're not.
We are here to let the master builder examine the foundation. Take heed, therefore, unto yourselves and to the eternal souls around you.